On the night of March 8, 2014, a Boeing 777-200ER aircraft prepared for what should have been a routine flight. This was Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, scheduled to fly from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, to Beijing, China. The aircraft was a modern and reliable workhorse of the skies, with an excellent safety record. On board were 239 people, a diverse group of individuals from more than a dozen countries. The majority, 153 passengers, were from China, many returning home after a holiday or business trip. The flight was under the command of an experienced captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, and his co-pilot, Fariq Abdul Hamid. As the plane taxied onto the runway and lifted into the night sky, there was no indication that this flight would be anything other than ordinary, just one of thousands of similar journeys happening across the globe at that very moment. The initial phase of the flight proceeded exactly as planned, a testament to the routine nature of modern air travel. The aircraft climbed to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, following its predetermined flight path northeast over the Malaysian peninsula. The weather was clear, and the mood in the cockpit was reportedly calm. The flight crew made their standard radio calls to air traffic controllers on the ground, confirming their position and altitude. For the passengers settling in for the overnight journey, the hum of the engines and the dim cabin lights would have been a familiar comfort. They were just under an hour into a 6-hour flight, with the promise of a new day in a new city just over the horizon. Every system on the plane was functioning perfectly, and all signs pointed to a smooth and uneventful trip to Beijing. Families and friends in Beijing were preparing to greet their loved ones at the scheduled arrival time of 6:30 a.m. local time. They tracked the flight's progress, expecting the usual updates as it crossed from one country's airspace to another. The journey from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing is a common route, one that is flown multiple times a day by various airlines. The path takes the aircraft over the South China Sea and then over Vietnam before heading north towards China. For the 12 crew members of Malaysia Airlines, this was a familiar routine, a job they had performed countless times before. But on this particular night, the ordinary would soon become the extraordinary, and the expected arrival would turn into an agonizing, unending wait for answers that have yet to come. The aircraft itself, registered as 9M MRO, had been in service for nearly 12 years and was considered a safe and robust plane. The Boeing 777 is one of the most successful long-haul jets ever built, praised by pilots for its advanced automation and powerful engines. It was equipped with multiple communication systems, including transponders that report its position to air traffic control and satellite data links for operational messages. The flight departed Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 12:41 a.m. local time. Everything about its departure was normal. The final radio transmission from the cockpit was a simple, "Good night, Malaysian 370," as the plane prepared to leave Malaysian airspace. These would be the last words heard from the flight, marking the final moment of normalcy before it vanished into an enduring and profound mystery. The sequence of events that led to the disappearance of MH370 began just as the plane was transitioning from Malaysian to Vietnamese air traffic control. At 1:19 a.m., about 38 minutes after takeoff, the aircraft was flying over the South China Sea. The co-pilot, Fariq Hamid, made the final verbal communication with Malaysian controllers, saying, "Good night, Malaysian 370." This was a standard sign-off as the plane was about to enter the airspace managed by Ho Chi Minh City. However, the flight never checked in with the Vietnamese controllers as it was supposed to. In the minutes that followed this last radio call, a critical and deliberate sequence of actions took place inside the cockpit. The aircraft's transponder, a device that automatically transmits its identity, altitude, and location to ground-based radar, was suddenly switched off. The moment the transponder went silent, MH370 became a ghost on the screens of civilian air traffic controllers. it simply vanished from their displays. This act alone was highly unusual, as turning off a transponder is not a standard procedure and requires a specific input from someone in the cockpit. While a catastrophic electrical failure could potentially disable such systems, later evidence would suggest this was not the case. The disappearance from secondary radar screens triggered initial confusion. Air traffic controllers in both Malaysia and Vietnam tried to contact the aircraft repeatedly, but their calls were met with silence. For a brief period, they may have assumed a simple communication error or a temporary glitch, a common enough occurrence in the busy skies. As minutes turned into an hour, the confusion grew into alarm. The plane had not reappeared on any radar screens, and no distress signal had been received. Airlines and air traffic control centres began a frantic series of checks, contacting each other to see if anyone had information about the missing flight. The airline's operations centre attempted to send messages to the plane via its satellite communication system, known as ACARS, but received no response. The silence was absolute. What was supposed to be a routine handover between two air traffic control zones had become the starting point of an unprecedented aviation mystery. The aircraft, with 239 souls on board, had effectively disappeared from the modern world's grid of surveillance and communication. At 1:21 a.m., just 2 minutes after the final voice transmission, the transponder ceased transmitting. A few seconds later, another key communication system, the Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, or ACARS, which sends short text-based messages about the plane's health to the airline, was also disabled. The timing of these events is crucial. Disabling both systems in such a short window strongly suggests a deliberate act rather than an accidental failure. The plane was now electronically invisible to the commercial aviation network. The lack of any mayday call or emergency broadcast from the pilots added another layer of mystery. In most in-flight emergencies, pilots have time to communicate their problems, but the crew of MH370 remained completely silent as their plane diverted from its path. While civilian radar lost track of MH370 when its transponder was turned off, the aircraft was not entirely invisible. Military radar, which operates independently by bouncing radio waves off objects, continued to track an unidentified aircraft. This unknown blip was flying a path that was completely inconsistent with the filed flight plan for MH370. The blip was observed making a sharp, deliberate turn to the southwest, flying back across the Malaysian peninsula. It flew over the northern part of Malaysia, navigating between waypoints that suggested it was being actively flown by someone with aviation knowledge. This was not the path of an aircraft that had suffered a catastrophic failure. It was the path of a plane under control, heading in a new and unapproved direction. The unidentified aircraft continued its westward journey, flying out over the Strait of Malacca and towards the Andaman Sea. Malaysian military radar tracked it for over an hour after it first disappeared from civilian screens. The last primary radar contact was at 2:22 a.m., showing the plane far to the west of its intended course, heading out into the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean. This radar data was a game changer. It proved that the plane did not crash in the South China Sea, where the initial search efforts were concentrated. Instead, it had flown for at least another hour in the opposite direction. The revelation that the plane had turned back so dramatically shifted the entire focus of the investigation and expanded the potential search area exponentially. Even after MH370 flew beyond the range of military radar, it was not completely gone. A satellite owned by the British company Inmarsat continued to receive automated pings from the aircraft for several more hours. These pings were part of a routine handshake between the plane's satellite data unit and a ground station, essentially confirming the system was still logged onto the network. The final ping was received at 8:19 a.m. Malaysian time, more than 7 hours after the plane first lost contact. These satellite signals did not provide a precise location, but analysis of the signals helped investigators determine two broad arcs, one to the north and one to the south, along which the plane could have been at the time of the final communication. The northern arc stretched across a vast area of Central Asia, while the southern arc pointed towards the remote southern Indian Ocean. The northern route was quickly deemed less likely, as it would have required the plane to fly over several countries with robust military radar coverage without being detected. The southern route, over a vast and empty stretch of ocean, was considered the far more probable final flight path. Based on this satellite data, investigators concluded that MH370 had flown for hours on autopilot until it likely ran out of fuel. It is believed to have then crashed into the sea, far from any land, in one of the most isolated parts of the world. This ghost flight phase remains one of the most chilling aspects of the entire event. In the immediate aftermath of the plane's disappearance, the search and rescue operation began in the South China Sea, the area where contact was last made. Malaysia and Vietnam led the initial efforts, sending ships and aircraft to scour the waters between their two countries. As days passed with no sign of wreckage, the scale of the operation grew dramatically. More than 24 countries, including the United States, China, and Australia, joined the search, contributing ships, planes, and advanced surveillance technology. The initial search area was vast, but as new data from military radar and satellite pings emerged, the focus shifted dramatically. The realization that the plane had turned west and flown for hours longer sent search teams scrambling to a new, even larger area in the Strait of Malacca and the Indian Ocean. The satellite ping data, which pointed to the vast southern Indian Ocean, presented an almost insurmountable challenge. This region is one of the most remote and inhospitable places on Earth. The ocean depths there can exceed 4,000 meters, and the weather is notoriously rough, with powerful winds and massive waves. Led by Australia, the new phase of the search became one of the most complex and expensive in aviation history. An international fleet of aircraft flew countless sorties, scanning the ocean surface for any sign of debris, while ships equipped with specialized sonar equipment were deployed to map the seabed. The search was a painstaking process, covering an immense underwater area of 120,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Greece. For nearly 3 years, from 2014 to 2017, the official multinational search continued. Teams used sophisticated autonomous underwater vehicles to methodically scan the seafloor, creating detailed maps in the hope of spotting the telltale signs of an aircraft wreckage field. The financial cost of this effort was enormous, exceeding $150 million, shared primarily by Malaysia, Australia, and China. Despite this unprecedented effort, the main underwater search failed to locate the aircraft. The vast, dark depths of the Indian Ocean kept their secrets. In January 2017, with no new credible evidence to pinpoint a specific location, the governments officially suspended the search, a decision that was met with heartbreak and frustration from the families of those on board. Even after the official search was called off, the quest did not end. In 2018, a private American company, Ocean Infinity, launched its own search on a no-find, no-fee basis. Using a fleet of more advanced autonomous underwater vehicles, they were able to survey the seafloor much faster than the previous effort. Their search covered another 112,000 square kilometers of the seabed, focusing on areas just north of the original zone, identified by drift analysis and new scientific modeling. Hopes were once again high that this new technology would finally solve the mystery. However, after several months of searching, Ocean Infinity also concluded its mission without finding the wreckage. The failure of even the most advanced technology to locate the plane only deepened the mystery surrounding its final resting place. While the massive underwater search missions failed to find the main wreckage, tangible evidence of the plane's fate began to wash ashore thousands of kilometers away. In July 2015, more than a year after the disappearance, a piece of an aircraft wing known as a flaperon was discovered on the shores of Réunion, a French island in the western Indian Ocean. Investigators quickly rushed to the scene. The part number on the debris confirmed that it was from a Boeing 777, and further analysis by French authorities definitively linked it to MH370. This was the first physical proof that the plane had indeed crashed, and its location was consistent with ocean current models showing that debris from the southern Indian Ocean would drift westward toward Africa. The discovery of the flaperon opened the floodgates. Over the next few years, more than 30 pieces of suspected